It was during the last days of the war in heaven that the doom of the Ingir came upon them. It was not a sudden thing. The storm whose wrath was to break upon the elder deities, whose violence was to enfold them, shatter them into broken shards, and cast them evermore into shackles beneath the lowest of things. Perhaps if they had been more watchful, the gods would have seen and halted what came next while the storm still gathered, while the winds of fate were rising. Perhaps they would have remained divine. Yet we of the tribes of Eldanesh and Ulthanesh, we know better than any how pride may lay even gods low. So it was with the Ingir. Long the war in heaven raged. In some tales, its dawn came with the first rays of the stars themselves, as the shadow that needs must be cast alongside the light. In others, it was a fire, a hungry and knowing flame that sped through the veins and arteries of the void, and wrought all that it touched unto blackened ash. Alternative myths tell of the war as an Ogier, both petty and unworthy, the changeling child of ambition bred of jealousy and spite, that soon outgrew those who birthed it, and sought to devour them all. Insatiable was the hunger of that first and greatest war. It burned worlds, crushed them to dust in its unmerciful grip, or ground them to ruin with its cavernous maw. It left untold destruction in its wake, and through the ruin the Ingir came dancing. Had they heard the music of endless slaughter and come to bring the performance to its crescendo? Did the Necron tear call upon them in their despair, and so invite across the threshold that which would both save and damn them? Was it all but a horrible chance? First did Mephedran bring his offer of kinship, the Deceiver singing poisonous promises from a silver-gilt tongue. To all the silent king listened and gave his blessing. Then came the days of dark sacrifice, the soul spend, the time of reapers' plenty, when the ghost arcs prowled, the unwilling screamed for mercy, and the uncaring furnaces roared with the Ogier's voice. There was death, and there was life's cold echo. Then there came a time when the Ogier walked the blood roads between the stars in manifold guises, and the glittering hordes marched upon the fastness eternal, while the Ingir soared on high. The labyrinth was flayed bare, its twisting ways trammelled, and its secrets turned back upon those who had first whispered them. The old ones perished in that terrible age. The Ingir drank deep of their potent souls, and then did they blaze like darkling stars. Yet already the storm was rising. Already the banshee's vengeful keening carried upon the bloodied winds. The Ogier had feasted unto satiation. The fire, still raging high and hot, had burned all that which might sustain it. In their moment of surpassing triumph the Ingir were vulnerable, for they had given much of themselves to at last cast down their age-old foes. They did not grasp the depth of loathing that their tainted gifts had conjured. About them they saw only slaves, savage and simple beings, content to feed the dying fires. They should instead have seen blades, each wrought from 1 billion pinpricks of starlight, yet no less sharp for their fractured form. They should have seen the doom that they had fashioned from their own cunning cruelty. The Ingir had promised allegiance, then demanded worship. Now they would know retribution, fit to shake the stars from the heavens and cast them a-blazing from the skies like the tears of Isha. The blows fell swift and terrible as, at last, the storm broke. Upon the chimeric way there fell upon Azagorod the Nightbringer, that which the Aeldari knew as Kalas Ra, fear in corporeal form, who sowed the fields of nightmare, whose shadow loomed long immortal thoughts and entwined eternal with death's embrace. With the eye of Ctan they set the gaze of the celestial many upon Azagorod, and in so doing they burned away the shadows that coiled about him. Sudden was its sundering, cataclysmic its demise, and the shards of its shattered form fell glinting into the void. Mephedron had first come before the Necrontier as emissary, as oath-singer, as a fashioner of falsehoods. The Deceiver it was, and 1,000 echoed whispered names besides, so woven with falsehood in its fabric that even Mephedron knew not where its own truth began and its lies found their end. Amidst the maze of endless beings did its doom come upon it, for the slighted servants brought to life the stinging spheres, and by their song was the Ingir wrought apart. So fell Mephedron, the Deceiver. Greatest and most terrible of all of the Ctan was Magladroth, the font of immortality, the forge of substance, that which was known as the Dragon. Yet about Magladroth's neck had hung the talismans of Vor, and by the light that spilled from within them had a secret weakness been revealed. Broken too fell the dragon by the hand of the Ogier, and the crimson glow of the prison sempiternal. Thus lay his work unfinished evermore. So fell Magladroth, the dragon. Most reviled by the unspeaking lord was Lash-Udra, that which birthed in the minds of mortals the sickness everlasting, that which walked always 3 steps behind, that which saw through the eyes of all, that was named as the Endless Swarm. The sorrow of the void it was that brought Lash-Udra to the mortal brink and severed its bonds beyond sight. In its breaking were 1,000 tides of misery released upon the stars, yet in its casket at last it lay. So fell Lash-Udra, the Endless Swarm. The mirth of all things cruel was Nyadra Zatha, who was called the Burning One, the immolating glee and the breath of the infinite pit. All things were its kindling, for its will was the searing that blackened the strands of eons, and its ravenous touch no thing of real nor the echo realm might endure. It was the pyre of the labyrinth, the torch of the ziggurats lost, the reaping winds of ember blight. How came that thing unto its end, no record speaks. That a single etching upon a single wall, upon a single world, shows the silent Lord himself laying the spear unto its molten heart. So fell Nyadra Zatha, the Burning One. Once begun, the storm could not be stayed, the scythe's reaping arc could not be halted, the Ogier's last rampage could not be held at bay. As though the stars themselves were wrapped in the velvet veil of the void's last morning, so the Ingir one by one were laid low, and their poisoned light extinguished evermore. They fell, and in their falling changed all that was real. In their millions did the risen slaves fall upon Landurugor, the Flayer, the lidless eye, and with the blades unforged they extinguished all that he was. So was his last curse loosed upon his slayers. They knew not what they wrought, but that it was vengeance, yet all paid the price even still. The outsider, Saranoga, had fallen already to the trickery of the laughing god, yet in its madness had it become terrible indeed. None could slay it, for its terror was too great to endure. Some tell that the outsider rent itself asunder and was taken in its turn. Others warn that no prison ever travailed it, that it alone of the Ingir never fell, and that one day it will return. Kalugura, the silent cry, was entombed eternally upon the world of the unspeaking. Igranaya, moulder of worlds, was bound, twisted and broken asunder by its own cosmic powers. Sisakla, the walking blight, the shadow that withers worlds, was lured through the inevitable gateway and broken within the void beyond. So ended that which cannot end. As the mirror struck by the grieving fist of sorrow, as the web that in its spinning so unwinds its strands, the Ingir were broken and rent, and into shards they fell. Yet theirs was the fire undying, the weft of the tapestry eternal, that which always is. They did not pass beyond, but rather lingered as a scream whose echoes fracture and fracture again, each portion but a stunted repetition of all that gave that first cry life, repeating aimlessly, purposelessly, yet raw and powerful still. Even broken and debased, the Ingir had not suffered enough. In tesseract shackles and fractured oubliettes were they bound. In the white heat of hate were their chains wrought, and cold as the void they were as they wound about the shattered echoes of the gods that came before. Fundamental and eternal rolled the waves of ruin across the starlit void, for as the Ingir were broken, so too was reality itself. Yet the Necron cared nothing for the harm they wrought. Slaves had become masters, and masters enslaved would be, until the last days of the Rana Dandra, and beyond. Extract from Aeldari Lore, the Book of Mournful Night, the Dirge of Stars Extinguished.